Hi, I'm Matt Williams. Welcome to Glimpses. My guest today is a dear friend and a brilliant composer. If you watched Home Improvement, Roseanne, Seventh Heaven, Mork and Mindy, Laverne and Shirley, and numerous other television programs, you've heard his music. He is serving his seventh term on the ASCAP Board of Directors. He has served for 17 years on the ASCAP Foundation Board, 10 years on the Television Academy's Music Peer Committee, and sits on the advisory board of the Film Music Society. And he has won 35 ASCAP awards. And while doing all that, he's composed unforgettable themes and melodies for so many shows. I am thrilled to have my buddy, Dan Foliart, on this podcast. Welcome to Glimpses, Dan.
Such a pleasure to be with one of my best buddies.
We go way back. I want to start because where I met you, and at the time your partner Howard Pearl was writing the theme for Roseanne, and that's the first time we really met for that. And
That's true.
yeah, and you remember the story because I'm not a musician. I don't read music. I can't sing. I'm musically ignorant. So I met with you, and we talked about what's the feel, what's the vibe of the music, and I remember saying it should feel like three women getting off work in a blue collar factory and swinging their lunch boxes and running them along a chain link fence and maybe going out for a beer, and it's that happy hour at the end of a work day. And you said,
That's right.
and you said, okay, let me go off and go take it from there. You went off.
Well, first of all, I think we have to back up a little bit.
Okay.
That came first of all, we met you through my wonderful friend Gail Maffeo.
Yes, dear Gail.
She said there is this terrific guy. He's coming in from New York, and I just think that you'd get along great with him. And so many thanks to Gail for that introduction. But the story you just told is kind of a part two. Part one is we went off, and it was kind of the end of the disco era, and we presented you something that was so totally wrong. I mean, it was as wrong as it possibly could be. For the first shot at for that theme. And you were nice enough to give us a second shot at it. And that's when you started giving those notes. And I think you said less Al Jarreau and more Muddy Waters.
This was when I want to tell this story because this speaks to your genius.
Okay.
We were actually in the recording studio with all the musicians, and you said, here's the theme that Howard and I have come up with.
Yeah.
And they played it. And it was da 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 da. And I went, the melody's fine. And you came over and you go, what is it? And I couldn't speak it to you in musical terms.
Yeah.
And that's when I said to you, more Muddy Waters, less Al Jarreau. And you looked at me and you went, give me 15 minutes. That's the God's truth. And you went into the studio and went to every musician and tuned them up sets. And then you played that theme, and I got chills up both arms. You just rocked it.
Well, I tell you what, Matt, that's one of the things that I think is lacking in the way music is done today. Is everything is auditioned time and time and time and time again, and you don't have to think on your feet as much as you did back then. But I think there's a certain excitement about being in the room and getting that note from you, and then taking that and the energy that comes from that, rather than, having given you like 25 different things
Right.
leading up to that. That's my opinion.
And also you had, and God rest his sweet soul, Juke, an amazing harp player. And Juke rocked it on the theme.
Oh, well, you remember after we totally missed the first shot, I said, okay, we have to set the tone of this. And we went into Sound City. And if you'll remember, Sound City, they've done a whole documentary about Sound City recorders. It was over in an industrial area, still there, but Nirvana recorded there, Bob Dylan recorded there. It was much more the tone that studio was than this kind of slick thing, that disco thing that we gave you first. But yeah, Juke certainly brought his magic to it. And Lawrence Juber on guitar, John Beasley was playing piano, Mike Jochum, Gary Herbig was playing the sax, and Dominic Genova was playing the bass. I mean, these guys were my team, you know, and but certainly Juke had that magic, and he didn't read music. I had to hum the parts to him and go, yeah, give me some of that Playboy lick, you know, and he knew exactly what I meant when I said, no, it's just like you talking to me. I had to talk to him and say, give me some of that Playboy.
That's great. And I'm going to flip to another wonderful theme, Home Improvement, because not only did you took Tim's signature grunt and the sounds of machines and machinery and incorporated all that in music. And I if I remember correctly, you just kind of did it and presented it. And I said, yes. Is that right? Am I remembering that correctly?
Well, by the way, I have my my Tool Time Benford
got your
here.
mug there. Okay. Benford Tools. Okay.
I wanted to get into my creative circle of solitude with you here today. That one, I remember I was living over at Oakwood Apartments near there, and I remember sitting around after we had this discussion, because we'd already worked together by that time.
Right.
And so I don't think there was that learning curve like maybe the first time we worked together. And yeah, I think I presented it first with just the basic, maybe me just playing guitar, right. And then I said, you know, we're gonna add tool sounds to this, and we're gonna add this grunt. And so I think the first time I presented it to you is probably me just playing it for you on guitar. But I said, this is what the palette's going to be. And there were probably 50 tools in that thing.
But you nailed it. I mean, you nailed it like the first time. And I remember there was a rough track, and then you said you were going to layer all this in. So yeah, that's it. Okay, I want to talk about how you write. Are you a ponderer, or do you just get a flash of inspiration and the song comes out? What is your process?
Well, I've always felt that my initial ideas, with the exception of that first Roseanne thing, but my initial reaction when I'm writing a piece of music, I react to the first take is kind of the best for me. Okay. You know, I know, like, I'm trying to work on a couple of theater projects now,
which I want to talk about. I didn't know you had 2 musicals in the works. We're going to talk about that.
Yeah. All right. But I know there's a lot of writing and rewriting and rewrite, and you know, but the way my career has basically been, and a lot of it has to do with the time constraints. There's not a lot of time to sit around and wait for the muse to hit you. So I think with me, it's more like that first inspiration is generally there, you know, and
it's that's like what some people call it in writing, the vomit draft or the dump draft, where whatever the visceral impulse is, you get it out on the page, and then you can kind of edit it and tart it up later. But it's what is that visceral release, that visceral energy, right?
And that's true, and in a lot of circumstances, I'll be sitting there and I'll be writing a piece of music for Underscore for a show, and I'll be getting it. I'll be getting teared up if it's an emotional thing, you know, just as I'm writing it, or if it's supposed to be funny, you know, maybe I'm sitting there laughing. But you know, I really trying to get that emotion into it, like right at the very beginning.
See, you know, and I that's what I appreciate about your music. And I learned something. 11 years you wrote Seventh Heaven, the music, and I didn't know that. And 11 years of writing music for an ongoing series. How do you keep yourself fresh? How do you, you know?
Well, first of all, Matt, because of the success I had with you, it allowed me to go on to do other things. And fortunately, we came back and did something again with George Lopez.
Yes.
But it gave me the opportunity to go out, and I finally got this album out. This is the music I wrote for that show, Seventh Heaven.
Okay.
I got this out. It's called Journey to My Heartland, and I'm sitting in the heartland right now in Frederick, Oklahoma. But
How big is by the way, how big is Frederick? This is where
3,500 people.
3,500 people. I joked before we started this podcast. I said to the guys here, I said, well, he's in Oklahoma, so you got Reba McEntire, Blake Shelton, and Dan Foliart all right here in Oklahoma.
Well, I like being in that crowd. But I'm in Frederick, but we also have my childhood home in Oklahoma City. So I got two here. But how to keep it fresh. In the case of Seventh Heaven, Lawrence Chuber, who played our great guitar work on both Roseanne and Home Improvement,
Right.
and St. George, I wrote different guitar tunings every week, and I probably had maybe 35 different guitar tunings where you tune the guitar, to different notes than you would traditionally tune a guitar to. You're called open tunings. And
Right.
So in that way, I always had these different tunings on the guitar I was working with, and I'd write all this stuff out. And Lawrence was amazing because he would read it just like regular guitar music, but you have to be very careful about what strings you played each note on, because if you played on the wrong string, it would sound terrible. So
Got it.
that's the way I kept that music fresh, was with all these open tunings every week.
And do you ever get what writers call writer's block? Do you ever get stuck? And if so, what do you do if you get stuck?
I just work through it. I really do, because the schedules that you had and have, and I had, as I said, you can't sit around and wait for the muse to hit you. You just got to work through it. You just work through whatever that block may be, and generally, it comes out, because music just flows for me. A lot of people have thought, I talk to other writers, they go, it's really, really hard for me to write. Not me. It's just bam, it just flows. And so I work through it.
Is there a spiritual aspect to your creativity? I'm not talking religious dogma. I'm talking, is there a spiritual aspect to your creativity at all?
Well, I feel like there's got to be a certain sense. There's stuff out there, and it's probably just out there kind of waiting, for the artist to grab it and bring it in. So I would say there's a certain spiritual. What do you think? I mean,
I think there absolutely is. And when you said out there and floating, and for someone to grab it, I've talked about this on a previous podcast about a poet who feels a poem coming and has to run in and grab a pen and write it out because it'll pass over. And I know, and my good friend Adriana Trigiani talks about, when she's writing, I have to tap into it. And she says, and then there's that experience where, as a writer, you don't even quite know. It's like flow. If you're playing basketball or a sport, you don't even know where it's coming from, and you don't want to get up or move because it may stop. And then you go back and you read it and go, I have no idea where that came from. And that comes from the source without a source, the muse, the daemon, whatever you want to call it. I do believe there is a tapping into the other world in order to channel and create.
Do you ever, sometimes I'll wake up from a dream and I'll have a melody in my head and I'll go to the piano and write it down. I don't know if you've ever had that experience.
All the time. In fact, if I'm really stuck, and this is when we're talking about being stuck and how do you get inspiration. If I'm really stuck in my writing, before I go to bed, I'll take a yellow pad and I'll write out, what should the character do? Or how should this scene? And I will consciously ask my unconscious mind to work on it while I'm sleeping.
Good.
9 times out of 10, I wake up either at 2 o'clock in the morning or 6:30 and go, oh, that's it. Okay. And then I don't run to the piano. I run to the yellow pad. Sometimes
Yeah.
it may hit in the shower or walking the dog, go, oh, that's what it is. But I really believe tapping into the deep unconscious, which is connected to, I believe, the superconscious, which connects you to this infinite intelligence, whatever label we want to call it. And you are channeling from it, whatever, and we can call it God, we can call it infinite intelligence, the Wonkan Tonka, the Great Spirit, whatever. But I believe there is a true, for me anyway, a spiritual
Yeah.
element to creating.
Absolutely.
So, okay, let's talk about this. I want to talk, I didn't know you were writing musicals. You have 2 musicals in the work. Tell me about that.
Well, I think you have been involved with the theater before.
Yes,
It is a slow track.
to say the
Uh,
least.
a gentleman who Rob Dames, who worked he was involved with Benson, and I worked with him on a show called Marblehead Manor, and another couple of shows. But he came to me with an idea for a musical called Back in the Game, and we started working on this thing. It's probably been 6 or 7 years ago. But he's very talented. He has shows being produced, not musical shows, but other non-musical shows being produced. But he came to me with an idea about dating, like in today's world,
Right,
whether you're young, whether you're old, and back in the days when I met Cheryl, my wife, you didn't have all this social media and
right.
everything. So you had to meet someone face to face. But this play delves into the whole social media aspect of dating, and we've had a really good time with it.
Right.
But we haven't got to the point where it's produced. Although I just found out yesterday it made to the second round of a musical festival in Florida. So
Good.
hopefully, but Rob has gone through several rewrites on the script. And we have a second one that takes place. I envision it right up on the hill from where we are, right here in Frederick, Oklahoma,
Right.
where my grandmother is buried, and my uncle is buried, and my grandfather is buried. It takes place in a cemetery, and these characters more or less come alive, and you hear their stories. And it's
Well,
called A Lovely Part of Town, which it is up there. And it's a one-act musical, which I don't know if you've done some one-acts. This is a one-act musical.
it
And
sounds like if you took a Horton Foot play or you took Our Town or something rooted
yeah,
that like that in small town and added music to it, that sounds wonderful. I mean,
and
that's a great
yeah,
idea.
and Spoon River Anthology,
Anthology. Yeah.
you know. So those are the two we're working on. And I'm also got an idea for one that basically talks about my songwriting career. Like before I met you, I was writing songs, and my partner at that time, Tom Chaparro, went on to, he's a Nashville, in Nashville Songwriters Hall of Fame. And so I've come up with a concept of taking all these songs that we wrote back when I was in my 20s, and incorporating those into a musical that kind of is a time capsule back in the
Well,
70s and so
I got to
forth.
ask you, you brought up Nashville. Do you ever have in your daydreams a daydream of going to Nashville and pulling out your guitar and maybe performing down there?
You know, I was
If you
down
do,
there.
I will buy a ticket and a beer and listen to you if you do that.
You know what? I love Nashville. We used to go there until COVID hit, every year for the ASCAP board of directors. And I got to know it very well. But yeah, I'd like to sit on the stool and play some of the songs. Absolutely.
Who are your heroes? If you, it can be a musician, it can be a composer, but
Yeah.
if you have a pantheon of, music folks, who would that be?
Well, let me tell you, one of the fabulous things about serving on this ASCAP, American Society of Composers, Authors, and Publishers. I'm now actually vice president. It's called writer co-chair. And I'm sitting around those heroes. I'm sitting next to Jimmy Webb, who grew up just north of here where I am. And, he wrote MacArthur Park and Wichita Lineman. So he was always a hero. And now we're friends. And, I've been on this board and I get to ask him questions. Hal David, Bacharach and David was another one of my heroes. And he was also, he was former president of ASCAP. I used to walk him back to his apartment in New York because we were over there across from Lincoln Center, and he lived next to the Modern Art Museum in one of those apartments up there. And I'd have about 25 minutes to walk him back and ask him every question that I ever had. And
great.
He told me. And so Hal David, Paul Williams, he's now our chairman of ASCAP. Paul was always a hero of mine. And so I'm writing with Alan Bergman. He's 97 years old right now, but he and Alan, Marilyn, wrote The Way We Were, and they wrote, theme from Tootsie, and they wrote Yellowbird. And Alan and I are writing together, and he's one of my heroes. So this ASCAP board has allowed me to be sitting next to all these people that were my heroes. So it's been fabulous.
You and the people you just talked about are a perfect example that the desire to create, that impulse to make out of nothing something, doesn't age. No matter what your age, it's painters that paint until they're in their 90s, the George O'Keeffes and others. I think that's inspiring, Dan, because you still got the juice. You're still doing it.
I'm still very excited about music. And so are you, by the way. You are doing it. I came to hear an absolute fabulous reading of this new book that you have coming out of all these stories. I mean, it's fabulous, right? You got to keep doing it.
Glimpses was after, and I understand. Here's the good and the bad about television, and we've both lived it. You said you don't have time to ponder, or you just have to put your butt in the seat and do it. And with television, the tyranny of the now is always there. You've got to get down to the floor. You got to get the rehearsal. We're taping. You've got to be in the recording studio. It just goes like that all the time. And so when I started writing a book, I felt like I had every day I was trying to be, and I went, I can relax and allow my unconscious to just allow these stories to unfold. And thank you. You were at the reading that I did here in Los Angeles. And people have responded very strongly to the stories. And I think it's because they're authentic, they're from the heart, they're about real events and my life. And there is a spiritual element to it. I don't have an agenda. I'm not trying to convert or convince anyone of anything. I'm just trying to share my heart with the audience's heart. And that seems to work. And so I appreciate your kind words and that you were there. So.
It's so, I think one of the things about you is it's always going to be very compelling to see what you come up with at whatever stage you are. I mean, you created two of the most fabulous, TV series of all time. And so everyone is going to be, I think, compelled. What's Matt going to come up with next? And I was so excited. And a couple of those stories, the snake story, it was, by the way, they're still playing Home Improvement every day back here on free television on the Laugh channel. I don't know if you know that, but they're playing it. And that snake episode that you referenced in one of your stories, came on in the other day, and I was thinking about you.
I just read, and because what we're talking about is in my youth, we actually had a snake in the house that got loose, and we lived on our telephone for 2 weeks. And so I took that idea with David and Carmen, and we wrote an episode on Home Improvement about a snake being loose in the house and crawling out of the wall down Tim's shirt. And so, when you draw from real life, you don't have to make up funny stuff. Just take what's truthful, what's real, and exaggerate a little bit, and you've got comedy, right?
Well, I mean, and that's what the Beatles did. By the way, they have a new song out after 40
I
years
just
today.
heard that on the way to this podcast. I just heard it on NPR or one of those stations. Yes.
They played it today, and I know what they said is they wrote about things that they knew about within
Right.
their own circle of experiences around England, and people they knew, Penny Lane, and I think writing about things that you know about, like you knew about the snake,
Right.
is fabulous, and I try and bring that to my music too.
Was guitar your first instrument? Did you learn on the piano? And how old were you when you started playing music?
Well, my cousin used to come like once a year for like holidays, and he'd always bring his guitar. And so I was very, very, intrigued by him sitting down and entertaining the crowd, with a guitar. So I picked up a ukulele when I was probably about 8 or 9, and I started playing the ukulele. And then that evolved into the guitar, and guitar has always been my first instrument. And I think I wrote most of the music for your shows on guitar. But if I'm going to, like, I'm working on another symphonic piece, you kind of need more of the piano to kind of get a feel of some of that. So I picked up the piano specifically like in college when I was back at Amherst College in Massachusetts.
I was going to ask you where I was going to ask you where you got your music education, because I should know this, but explain what was the training
Yeah.
you had to do what you've done for all these years?
Well, back in high school, my mother named the name of the band. Now, this is a mother's name. We were called the Scholars. Okay, the Scholars.
Well, it's better than the Nerds. I mean, come on.
The Scholars. I mean,
Yeah.
come on. And, I was sitting there playing Jamaica Farewell, and maybe I was playing Yellow Bird with the band. And then people started going, Dan, it's got to be a little edgier than that, the Scholars. And so we became the Night Riders. Okay. The night, and be playing at assemblies there at the school. And so I kind of self-taught myself a lot, but I also studied guitar in Oklahoma City. But then when I got to college, I went as a poli-sci major because my dad was very prominent attorney in Oklahoma City. And I always figured that I'd probably follow in his footsteps and go into practice of law. But I got into Amherst College, small school in Western Massachusetts. And I went to a James Taylor and Carole King concert in Fitchburg, Massachusetts, my freshman year. And this was when James Taylor was just starting out. And Carole King was one of my heroes because she wrote all these wonderful songs, Up on the Roof, Will You Still Love Me Tomorrow in the early 60s, Point of No Return. But they did this concert, and I was so moved after seeing that concert a few weeks into my freshman year. I went back. I was playing baseball. That's one reason I got in. They thought I was going to be a great baseball player. I wasn't, but I quit the baseball team. I changed my major to music, and I never looked back after that one seminal moment of deciding that's what I was going to do. And so then I studied music at Amherst, composition and harmony and all that. And
I would call that not only a glimpse, that's a major glimpse. The fact that in that moment you saw this concert, you saw these two people, and something inside you had this epiphany, and that changed the course of your life. That's pretty amazing. That's amazing.
I don't know. Did you have anything like that?
Yeah, I started out in college thinking I was going to be an English major and a PE minor. I figured I would be an English teacher in high school and coach the football team because, like you, both of us, this is why I think the symbiotic relationship exists. I'm from Indiana, you're from Oklahoma. Baseball, I played football. That's what paid for my college education, was being a football player.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, so I was on a football scholarship, And then about the first semester, something happened, and I just kind of had this moment. Well, I can tell you, at the University of Evansville, I saw a production of Hamlet when I was in high school, and it planted the seed. And when I went to the University of Evansville on the football scholarship, I walked into Shanklin Theater and I went, oh, this is where I belong. There was no question.
Wow.
This is what I need to do. Change my major, just like you, became
Yeah.
a theater major. And so I was a football playing theater major. So on the football team, they called me Thespis. And then, of course, in the theater, they called me the jock. But the discipline's not that different, really, in sports. If you think about it, you got a playbook, you got a script, you got a coach, you got a director, you've got a cast, you've got a team. You have to work together toward a single goal. So it made sense to me. But yes, I did have that turn in college. And I think you and I are both fortunate when you find your major definite purpose in life, when you find that thing, then every day is joyful. And yes, you're going to have stress, you're going to work hard, but it's coming out of that authentic place deep inside you because you found your thing, you found it. And you obviously did. I mean, look at your career.
Well, Matt, first of all, I think the greatest thing that I'm hearing is that you didn't quit the football team, because looking back, that is one of my huge regrets in life. I went to a small school. I could have played baseball and still gotten into music. For some reason or another, I felt like I needed to make this.
No, but you could have had a foul ball or done and broken one of your fingers and wouldn't been able to play guitar. So you made the right decision. Now, before we've still got some time here, but you and I must talk about this. Our love of the blues. We both love authentic roots in the blues. And can you explain to me why that is such a passion for you?
Well, first of all, I've got something I want to talk to you about offline about the blues, but
Okay.
it gets into your soul, man. I mean, we were going down the Natchez Trace and in Mississippi, and we went by where Robert Johnson was born. And there's something about that region of the country where these guys were creating this music. And it's truly soulful. And there's something when you hear that harmonica playing or you hear that slide guitar, and it's basically the blues are kind of a 12 bar for, people that are into music. It's a 12 bar thing that is repeated basically. But within that, there are thousands, if not millions, different variations that you can bring your own soul to it. But
Right.
It's almost like having that structure, that 12 bar structure gives you more freedom because you can take that and your own identity to it. So there's something about when you hear the blues, and I know that you have always loved the blues, and that's one reason that you wanted to hear that in the Roseanne.
Yeah, I did.
Yep. You wanted to hear that, and it served that show well.
Well, I think, and not to get pedantic about it, but the blues coming from the field hollers from Africa and that chant, that call and response that exists, that is so atavistic. That's visceral. That goes way down deep in the soul. And then, Nashville obviously is the country music center. But when you go to Memphis and you go to the Sun Studios, when I went there the first time, I being a big Elvis fan and Jerry Lee Lewis and Johnny Cash and all those people, but when you go to Memphis and you realize the blues and that Celtic kind of hillbilly music and all of that coming together in Memphis and creating rock and roll, and where the blues is really the foundation of all that.
It's true. By the way, I did this album, Remembering Elvis.
Oh, no. All right.
I got to get you a copy of this.
I want a signed copy of that. Put your name on it and send it to me.
Remembering Elvis. And by the way, I've been hanging out with Mike Stoller, who's still around.
Is he really?
Jailhouse Rock He wrote "Loving You." He wrote "Bossa Nova Baby." He wrote "Kansas City." He wrote all these blues songs. He and his partner. But anyway, I've gotten to know him really well. Hey, another one of my heroes there. But yeah,
Now, wait. Are you singing on this album? Is that you singing,
that's
Elvis?
me. That's me. Yeah.
I know it's you on the cover, but I mean, did you have Did you have somebody else in the back doing the vocals, or you?
No,
really
I'm doing it, and
all your
musicians are playing on this thing. I got to get a speed copy of this thing out to you. Although I did it a few years ago, I got to get one of these things out to you.
All right,
Bring Elvis.
I'm a big Elvis fan, so I can't wait. I want to hear that album.
You got it, man. You got it.
Have you ever? I don't even know where this question's coming from. Have you ever done a Christmas album? Have you ever recorded one or thought about it?
Well, I have. There was a gal who sang on one of my shows. Her name was Barbara Morrison, great blues singer, by the way, absolute fabulous blues singer. And we were thinking about doing one at one point. I've written a couple of Christmas songs,
right?
But yeah, I mean, maybe that's something I should consider doing.
I think I don't know how many years ago Bob Dylan released a Christmas album, and I went, if Bob Dylan's releasing a Christmas album, I think maybe Dan Foliart should.
He's going jingle bells, jingle.
Oh, jangle bells, oh jangle bells.
Maybe I should.
So you've got the musicals going, you've got the albums going. What else? Is there anything else that are you going to do any live venues, or are you pretty much in the studio these days?
I'm a bit of a ham. I like to get up there and perform. In fact, I was doing Mustang Sally about 2 weeks ago. I'm involved with this big garden in Los Angeles. I was president of the board, and the band was playing, and I just went up there and grabbed the microphone, did Mustang Sally. I enjoy getting up and entertaining, and I've always thought about doing that a little bit. But one thing, while I'm back here in Oklahoma, I've been working. It only took me 35 years. I finished a symphony. It was actually finished during COVID, of the Trail of Tears, where the Indians were transferred from North Carolina and Georgia to Oklahoma.
Yes.
And I've written a symphony, a 20-minute symphonic piece that finally, after 35 years, I got this thing finished. And I think I did the first demo on one of your sessions.
Really?
Remember when we did the Wind Dancer logo? And by the way, that when it comes on at the end of Home Improvement, and you have that 60-piece orchestra, man, it just like envelops that 2 or 3 seconds.
Yeah.
Wind Dancer. But anyway, I think I did the first demo like 30 years ago, and I finally got this thing finished after all these years. And I'm going to see the symphony on Saturday in Oklahoma City, and hopefully talk to the conductor and tell him about this symphonic piece, because during 2007, they performed a symphony of mine called Oklahoma Trilogy for the centennial of the state back there.
Oh, okay.
So this has been kind of the follow-up piece. So that's been something that I've been very interested in working on.
Now, we are two of the old guys in the industry now, and if I'm a young musician fresh out of Berkeley or one of these colleges, and I come to Dan Foliart and say, give me some advice. What should I do to break into this industry? I want to write songs. I want to make music. What would you say?
Well, first of all, you've got to want to do it more than anything in the world. I think maybe in the beginning, I was kind of focused on maybe 2 or 3 things. Even though music was my main thing, there were a couple of things within that. I finally found my niche in writing music, like for your TV shows. But you've got to be passionate about it. You've got to be willing to pretty much drop everything and go full board into that. And there's going to be a lot of disappointment, because there's a lot of rejection. I hate rejection, Matt, but you got to be willing to have a thick skin, and you've got to want to do that more than anything else. You can't be, like I want to do 15 different things. You've got to stay laser focused on music. And unfortunately today, so much is done with electronic music. I think I would encourage someone to use the live players just like we always did, because trying to get the inspiration from a Juke Logan out there, or Lawrence Chuber, or a Gary Herbig, bring in all that natural energy from these live musicians. I would say, have the passion, and also be willing to still work with individual people that can make your work better.
Yeah, that's great advice. I always wrap up a podcast by talking about glimpses, and we kind of touched on it. And the idea of glimpses is finding little glimpses of God in your daily life. And by God, I'm not talking about some being floating on a cloud. I'm talking about moments of grace, kindness, tenderness. Mm-hmm. Do you see glimpses in your daily life? Do you see moments of grace and goodness ever?
I think as long as you're a person who is a person that brings that to the people you're around. I try, and when I was, working on all your shows, I tried to make every day with those musicians a good day. So when they left, they said, basically, I had a good day in my life. And so I think a lot of it comes down to you as a person, what you give out to other individuals. And as long as you can be kind and bring that love and spirituality to other people that you're with every day, and hopefully make their day better, I think that it also in turn makes your day better. So I think I see glimpses every day, when I make someone feel better about what they're doing. And, every moment there are opportunities to do that.
And I must say, on a personal note, you always do that. You always make everyone in the room feel seen and heard and special. You bring a positive energy, even when we're rewriting and scrambling or it's not working. And that is a perfect example of the measure you give is the measure you get back. And Dan, because you are so loving and kind to people, that's why so many people love you in return and love being a part of your life. So I think you're a living example of a glimpse. So that's great.
I'm glad we found each other, Matt.
I am too.
I really am. I wish we were a little closer to each other, where we could see each other more often,
Well, I just want to say thank you for doing this podcast. It's been a treat. And to everyone that's listening, I just want to offer this up. As you go about your day, take the time to stop, look around, and catch a glimpse. My friends, thank you so much for tuning in for another episode of Glimpses. Speaking of, Glimpses is now available for purchase at your online retailer of choice. And the best part? Every penny earned will be going to charities who support children in need. You can get your copy in the link below.